Welcome back, everyone. Sorry it's been probably quite a while since I put up my last video. I did what I thought was quite a lot of filming and managed to lose a lot of the footage, which, as you can imagine, was quite tricky mentally, especially when I enjoy painting as much as I do. Filming on top of this and trying to get it pushed out there for you guys, it took a bit of a hit, but I'm back and I'm going to try and put some stuff together. So this video is going to be part of a series where I put together the king of my household Bretonia, High Lord Trystrum Prydwen of Albion in his battle suit Excalibur Prime. Now, to make Trystrum, I'm going to be using the Imperial Knight Quorus Kits and some of the bits for Canis Rex. In fact, in the game, he'll probably be playing using his rules, but of course, for flavour wise, he is my own High Lord. So for those who haven't built the Quorus Kit, they are the massive knight suits that have their little bondsmen running around. It's an absolute mammoth kit. It comes with loads of parts, lots of options, and it is just an absolute beast of a thing to put together. For me, the ones I put together are basically mini dioramas as a model. So to begin Trystrum, all I'm going to do is clip all of the pieces off that are his lower half, his striding legs, and organise them nicely into pieces, ready to files down and put together nice and simply. Now, if you've put together a Games Workshop Walker kit before, you probably know that the legs kind of come in one or two options, left leg forward or right leg forward, and the knights are no different. So what I'm going to do here is actually make it a little bit more posable, and to do that it's pretty simple. All I'm going to do is score along this knee joint here. You can nicely follow where it's recessed in, and you might want to attack it from the back a little bit, both sides, left knee, right knee, just to allow you to have a bit more option really. And you'll start to notice just towards the end there, I'm going to give it just a slight help by bending it ever so carefully and just a little bit more scoring until it nicely snaps away, ready for me to neaten it back up. 3 more leg pieces to go, and then we've got some nicely posable legs. So now it looks like we've got some leg pieces pretty much coming together. And now you can sort of see that we have a more flexible knee there. So give me far more options, but unfortunately the pipes that connect will limit us a little bit later on. And of course it's not just the knee that we can make a little bit more flexible. Let's talk about the hip as well. GW has provided us with this kind of star socket shape, which again really helps you with that left foot or right foot forwards, but all I've simply done is scored that away, which allows you to glue it on in any angle that you like. And so now you can see that his legs are all nicely stuck together, and you can see he's just got a little bit more of a dynamic pose than the standard Quorus that you'd see out of the box. Now, as you can see off to the left, just slightly there, my guy's going to have a massive sword. So what I'm trying to do is make it look like he's putting one leg forward and really rotating at the hips to swing that lumbering thing towards his enemies. And through the power of editing, as you can now see, things are really starting to come together as we have all the armor panels on. However, as a recommendation, I've actually only stuck these on with blue tack for now. That just means that I can get all the way behind all of these panels here, because the last thing you'd want, especially if you use a lighter base coat, is to not be able to get your paintbrush in there and leave some glaringly obviously grey or white plastic. So moving quickly on, as we have our legs now fully built, we're going to move to that upper body, and as you can see I've already prepped all of the torso components as well as a tiny little bit of sprue to help me out. So in the mantra of keeping things simple, I have my base plate of the torso there sat on top of his hips, and then by using just a little bit of glue, putting that on top of the hip joint there, all I'm going to do is use this bit of spare sprue to essentially stop the base plate from going back through. I've had loads of people ask me how I get my hips to rotate. It is as simple as that. but I will say just make sure to let it dry, as I think I may have edited it out, but it can easily pop off if it's still wet. And from here it's just as simple as gluing the top half together. This is definitely one of those kits where I'd recommend putting it together dry fit, which means see how it goes before you put any glue on there, because I definitely the first time got it wrong. So unfortunately this little gap here was one of the random victims to some of the missing footage, where I just explained me putting together the tilt shield and some of the extra details, but as you can see they look pretty good, hopefully. But back onto the nice hip joint. So as you can see, even with all these bits on here, it's free to rotate, nice and simple, and yeah, it means I can basically keep posing it as and when I want. So you're probably starting to notice a bit of a theme with the extras that are going on to Trystrum here, the very dark angels base, and that's to fit them in with my homebrew chapter, the Praetors of Albion, and all I've simply done is take the standard bearer from the Dark Angels Terminator set and add the chains that normally go on the Knight banner. Now this next bit might sound a little bit silly, but I have bought a third party shield to go behind his laser weapon here, just to make sure that the sword arm can be on the right hand side, because as we all know, the best swordsmen are right handed. And it makes my guy just that bit more unique too. So you'll notice now that the arms are put together and we've got a couple more of his carapace plates also blue tacked on, and he's really starting to come together. You'll notice there's an extra tilt plate I've decided to double up, just like some of the Terminator captains you see in the Dark Angels. He has now his massive sword, which also is glued onto his power fist there. And I'll try and make sure to leave a link to the third party where I got these pieces from. Some more Dark Angels bits. I've got some Deathwing parts on his pauldron there, and yeah, I'm really happy with him. Though I do keep staring at these big blank empty spaces thinking that I need to put something on them, but let's save that for some painting. Now, one of the reasons why I actually chose Imperial Knights was I wanted some really cool looking models and to actually learn how to make cooler bases. So what to do with this huge diorama worthy base? Well, let's have a look. First thing to do is think about what direction do we want to occupy this base. You have to be wary of the feet of your model, because obviously they need to be flat down and connected to your base. So I like using these bits of the Citadel terrain pieces. They obviously are quite modularized and you can put them together in a decent orientation, and let's just see what we come up with. So after a bit of fiddling around, this looks like it could be a pretty cool shape for a diorama base fitting the High King of Albion. Now if you've seen any pictures of my other knights, you'll see they all tend to be different shapes, but I do like to leave some open space to have some lava effects showing through from the bottom of the base. A side note here, again, if you have checked out those pictures, you'll see that lava effect. One of my mates has lovingly called this the tomato soup base effect, and sadly I see what he means there, so more practice needed. So another huge but tricky part that you can see is where to add these wall pieces, as if you get it wrong they can get in the way of the knight's arm and actually prevent them from swinging around. So as you can see, I've gone with quite a small wall section, and I've checked that the arm cannon here is still free to move as easily as possible and can lock onto any enemy of the Imperium. So we're committing to this shape now, and some plastic glue has been sprayed, but as you can see, if we start to look down over the top of our base, a bunch of these pieces are going to stick out over the edge of our already colossal base size. Now for practicality sense, as those bits can easily get caught on any bit of terrain or other model on the table, here's my revolutionary method to prevent that issue. So simply blue tack the pieces where you want them to, and as looking as a best top-down angle as you can, simply paint a line over the top of where you need to cut. Now I've used a nice obvious red, and I've made sure to give myself a tiny bit of breathing space, because you can always file down after you cut it, you can't add back on as easily. You will notice, mainly because I'm pointing at it, that this does go through a bit of the chunky part of my wall here, but that just needs a bit more elbow grease and some filling in later. And with a seamless transition, we'll pop the large piece off and begin hacking away. I'm using the GW hobby saw as I'm a foolish GW loyalist, however other hobby saws are indeed available. So you can see with my speedy and definitely not sped up cutting, the first bit is off, and we'll do a bit of a tester to see how well that fits. Luckily, along the wider parts of this curved base, that one cut is actually pretty damn close, and it'll only need a little bit of filing down and it pretty much should be spot on. Be a bit more complicated for those other ones, but the edges of the curved base though. Now don't worry, as harsh as I am, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me cut all those other little bits off. And here's the result. As you can see, no one can now accuse me of modelling for advantage, as it all now perfectly matches the edge of the base. You may also notice that some off-camera tinkering, I've also used a bit of scrap sprue to raise up that large piece just to help me pose my knight a little better. Now, no sponsorship plugs just yet, as I'm way too small for that, but here I'm doing an expert job of advertising Geek Gaming's modelling compound, which I purchased from my friendly local gaming store for the whopping price of £5.50. And I'll show you why I broke the bank for this one now. So here I've laid down a bit of newspaper and made sure I have some paper towels ready, and again, just going to double check the plan before everything gets all messy. So I'm happy that it's looking good, and already have my modelling compound mixed all together. It's basically some shredded newspaper type stuff with some plaster of Paris, I think, that you basically need to mix with water, and I'm using an old takeaway tub here as a mixing bowl. Now something I've learned the hard way, you don't want your modelling compound too wet or runny, as it does take ages to dry, and you'll really need to squeeze the water out of it so it actually gets nice and sticky to whatever you're sticking it to. You'll see I'm starting to stick down the smaller side of the base simply by just squeezing it down onto the wet compound. Luckily the floor plates themselves are quite textured underneath, so will grab onto the wet compound. You'll also notice I'm just starting to cut away the excess which is oozing over the side of the base. Over to the other side now, and I've placed a bunch of compound down, aiming to have a bit of a slight angle slanting down the way, just to help with the dynamic posing of my knight's legs. I did, however, end up adding a bit too much, and after a bit of testing by putting the terrain down, I had to cut away a bit of the excess compound. Again, always checking that the spaces and angles work well, and that the feet of my knight can connect well with the plastic parts of the base. Once I have the height and the angle that I'm happy with, I can now stick it back down and begin to seal the large part down around the edges. That way it looks a bit more natural and part of the actual geography of the base. As I'm going around, I'm trying to smooth over the outside edge of the base and trying to keep it in line with the actual edge of my model. It doesn't need to be perfect at this stage, and we will come back to that later. You'll also notice I'm starting to give the beginnings of that element of mud and grassy textures that will actually stay on the base after we're done. So we're at a pretty good point here to show you. You can get the overall idea of what's going on and see that it's still looking a bit rough around the edges, quite literally. But it's a long way towards having a cool scenic base for my model. So got a little bit of work done off camera again. Sorry, I clearly got carried away or something. What I've done is I've added some more modern compound inside of the L-shaped wall. That way it looks like a build-up of Romulan debris. And you may also notice these odd coloured mini bouldery looking things, which I've squished into the wet compound. This is basically broken up cork, like the stuff you'd get on a pinboard. You can either get this in sheets and break them up yourselves, or, yet again, not sponsored, but open to that sweet, sweet capitalism, I'm using Geek Gaming's cork boulders, which have been pre-broken up and handily look like scale little stones. So, with some expert camera work there, zooming in into my relic sword, you'll also see I've decided to pop a bit of bling onto my knight with some Black Templar / Space Marine inspired stuff. Here I've decided to use some 3mm chain that you can easily get off of Amazon, and just simply super glue it around the sword and the power fist there, so that the weapon looks like it's actually bonded to the suit. Also, because the chain looked pretty cool, and I thought it wasn't too much detail, I've also used it to lock the Dark Angel shield onto his left side tilt shield, because rule of cool at the end of the day.
Just a quick one here, the kit does nicely come with a Knight's Cockpit throne, and as with me, I do hate to waste some cool detail if the kit gives it to you. Again, like with the armour plates from before, I haven't actually stuck these pieces together yet, as that would make it an absolute nightmare to paint all those details nicely. I have also made sure that the head of my pilot matches on both the seated cockpit version and the walking character model too, as I have made a cheeky head swap, and it would look a little bit weird if they were different, wouldn't it? Quick side note, the little pilot hopping out is a game mechanic that my mates really hate, as he does usually tend to run away. But I have to say, if you've played Titanfall before, you can easily imagine this being pretty cool, with the pilot escaping as the suit bravely blows itself up in enemy lines. And again, apologies for some missing content. Captured in this picture is some green stuff that I've put together and used to smooth out the outline of the diorama base. The reason that I've used it instead of the modelling compound is it's the easiest way to achieve that nice flat finish. All I've done is put the green stuff on, and by using a paintbrush, a sort of like a rolling pin, I've rolled it around the edges to give myself that really nice flat line. Plus, it also means that it's less likely to crumble away or get scratched like the modelling compound if left all by itself. So the last part of this build video is to make a hinge for the pilot's hatch. Now the GW kit comes with two options, which is to have the hatch glued closed or fixed wide open, which I think would look a little bit silly in the heat of battle, but again, it would be rubbish to miss out on all that cool cockpit detail. So here's my very simple method on how to achieve that. Firstly, I have to snip away at the very back of the lip on which the hat sits on. This will just get in the way of the mechanism we're about to make. It can be a bit fiddly to get in there at first, so I clip a decent bit away from the edges with my clippers and then use a decent knife to cut away the rest into an open rectangular space. So I'm super speedy filing and last slices with a knife, and it's all ready for the back of the edge of the cockpit hatch. So the hatch itself actually has two little protruding roundy parts from it. Now we're actually going to clip those away and file it down until it's flat with the rest. And just going to sit it back in place to check that it still fits very nicely, and looks all good here. Next up, we're going to need to grab a very underrated modelling tool, which is the paperclip. And by checking it against the drill bit that I currently have in my drill, that means I can see if they're very nicely the same size. That way the paperclip will perfectly fit into the hole that I'm about to drill. So what I'm going to do next is to get two reasonably long straight bits of the clip and clip them both off to form the hinge arms. Using my clippers and by squeezing on them just a tiny little bit, bending the paperclip, I can achieve a nice decently tight 90-degree bend on the straight part that I had there before. And it's rinse and repeat so that I have an identical looking piece for the other side. So if I grab the hatch and put both hinge arms on, you should be able to get the idea of how the simple mechanism should be able to work. Grabbing the top carapace again, we're then aiming for those holes to come out just about here on the inside of that open space we've made earlier, just where the hatch sits. Sadly, there isn't enough space for us to drill from the inside, so we're going to have to carefully attack from the outside, making sure that we have our drill very nicely lined up. Some very careful drill work there, only just pushing carefully on the drill, and once I'm happy that I've neatly cleared the one side, it's time to simply do the same on the other side. Job's a good one. I'm just going to use the tip of my hobby knife to open up the lip of the hole on the inside, plus that clears away any leftovers from the drilling I just did. That now means that I can put the paper clips into the holes and both check that the angle of the bend is good. Whoops, needs a bit of adjust there. But also check that the clips excess isn't going to be sticking out too far from the holes that we've drilled for them. I managed to achieve this by being a little lazy at first and clipping off the extra bit while the clip is still in place, and then just taking off a little bit more once I've taken it back out again. And there you go, one very pleasing, very simple hinge arm. No need to do all that faff again for the other side, simply just put the two paperclip pieces together and make them look like each other. Very nearly there. As you can see, both of them are now in place. Maybe still need a bit of a trim for the exposed parts, but once the hatch is glued on top, you'll have a working hatch system. Fast forward just a smidge and I've glued the hatch on, as well as adding some of the final details back to the cockpit, lining up the internal window to slightly hide that hatch system. That's really simple that I've used, but as you can see, works fine, as even stiff enough to hold itself open. That way I can show it off once the inside's all done. And there we go, all put together, looking glorious in grey, ready for a paint scheme which I have to figure out yet. If you do look closely at the picture, you'll spot I've also taken some time to add some brave little guardsmen to the base for two kind of reasons. First, it adds to the scale of this lumbering mechanical beast. Oh, and of course, rule are cool, guard are cool, and fun to paint, so they're going on there. So with that, that's the video over, and I really wanted to say a quick massive thank you for watching this far. I've really loved this project and the hobby in general, but trust me, I've really been struggling putting this video together, and the footage is actually genuinely about a year old. I really hope you enjoyed watching this, and I know that putting grey plastic together isn't always that interesting. I also hope that the video seemed a little bit better as I went along, and you may have even noticed that I invested in a proper microphone so that I sound a little bit less like an aggressive potato. Huge thanks again for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, as every single one is huge for a tiny little channel like mine. And check out some of my other videos too if you're keen. Bye.